We're going to.
Sorry, we're going to record.
Okay, sounds great. So I'll start out by talking a little bit about the company and about myself, maybe give Sam a little introduction too, and then I'll hand it over to Sam. So my name is Jiten Vaidya. I am the CEO and co-founder of PlanetScale. Um, Me and my co-founder Sugu, we have known each other for about 25 years. And the first time we worked together was at a company called Informix Software, which was a relational database company back in the mid 90s. So we have been sort of doing databases together since then. Um, After Informix, Sugu joined X.com, then PayPal, then YouTube a couple of months before YouTube was acquired by Google. In the meantime, I had left Informix, worked at a couple of startups, joined Google's search quality team in 2005. So when Sugu arrived at Google with the YouTube acquisition, he knew that I was at Google. He pulled me into YouTube. I was one of the first Google engineers to transfer to YouTube. And then that was the second company that we worked together at from around 2007 to 2013. And that was the time when YouTube was seeing exponential growth and YouTube's backend database infrastructure needed to be scaled. And that's when we founded the open source project Vitess, on which our company is based. Vitess is basically a sharding middleware that sits between your applications and multiple instances of MySQL databases. And it gives your applications the view that it's talking to a single humongous database. Um, we serve really large scale traffic at YouTube. And back in 2017, when Slack and Square were facing the same problems, Sugu and I went to both Slack and Square, gave them talks about how Vitess would be useful for them, and convinced them to invest in Vitess, start contributing to Vitess, etc. And by around end of 2017, it was clear to us that a commercial entity built on top of Vitess was a viable thing, and we started thinking about starting a company. We waited for about a year because we wanted YouTube to donate Vitess, which has always been a Apache 2 open source project, to the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. And that got done in early 2018. And then we started the company. This was a little delayed than what we had earlier wanted to, but it was fortuitous because it gave me the opportunity to go and work at the United States Digital Service in Washington, DC. I think you folks are pretty familiar with the USDS and the work that they do. It's a small 150 people agency that directly reports into the White House. It's a really great way for technologists to give back to the government. Started PlanetScale in 2018, raised a $3 million seed from SignalFire. And Aditya and Ruchi, I had worked with both of them at Dropbox. And they are folks who have seen these scaling problems before. They were very interested in investing in us, and we were very happy to have them as investors. And that's how this relationship with South Park Commons started. I'm also really excited, and I'm really you guys have basically built a really interesting community at SPC. So I wanted to compliment all of you for being a part of that. This has been a great relationship. And just to continue the story of PlanetScale, we right from the early on, I mean, when you are doing a company on top of an open source, there is always a question about how exactly are you going to monetize it. There are many different models. There is open core, there is open cloud, which was sort of just about being explored back in 2018. By now, it's a fairly well established model, and from early on, that's where we wanted to go. That's what we wanted to build. So our first product was basically a cloud hosted Vitess. It was more or less, as difficult to use as most cloud products today are. Sam joined us about 6 months ago from um, GitHub. He came to us from Facebook, but before that he was a VP of engineering at GitHub. and he conceived of and built the GitHub Actions product. And uh, so he saw the capabilities in Vitess, and he saw the possibility for a really great developer first cloud native database that we could build on top of that. And that is what we have built. And that is what we released a few weeks ago. And we are really proud of how well it is being received and the innovation that we have brought to the cloud database market. It's really beautiful to use. It creates a database for you within seconds, and it has this novel concept of a database branch. Those of you who have worked in product development before kind of understand this, that there is a production database, and then you have typically end up having a staging database and a dev database, etc. But all of these are considered separate instances of databases. There is no relationship, there is nothing that combines them together as a part of a single entity, different, which is bigger than a database. And we have done that in this concept of database branching. Sam is going to do that. So Sam will show you how that actually looks in the product, etc. Just to complete the story of the company, we raised 22 million from A16Z from in 2019, and we have some exciting news about fundraising that we will be releasing in about a week's time. So we are a fairly well-funded company at the moment. About 65 folks, plan to grow to about 90 to 100 by the end of the year. In 12 states and 6 countries now after COVID. We used to have a big office in Mountain View. Don't plan to renew that office. We are a truly distributed company by now. And with that introduction, I'll hand it over to Sam.
Thank you, Jiten. Hi, everyone. Okay, so I haven't got some canned sort of, baking show where it comes out of the oven all done demo. I'm going to show you the product. I'm going to talk to you about what the product does and where we can go. And I would love it if people have questions, just to interrupt and ask the questions. I would love it if everyone went away truly understanding what we're trying to do here with PlanetScale. I would love to hear feedback and hopefully convince you to kind of kick the tires and give it a go. As Jiten said, I was at GitHub running a big chunk of engineering over there. We ended up using Vitess. We ran into scale issues like everybody does. We're hoping, if we get our job right, we will prevent these scale problems for everybody else. You're at the beginning of company life and building products that delight your users. And I'm sure you find it pretty easy to get out there, talk to users, build products, make them excited. And as time goes along, that gets tougher and tougher. And I see so many companies kind of stop building. How many times have you bought into a product, it feels like it's changing, it's evolving, and then one day you don't hear anything? Like it just gets slower and you're not seeing the innovation on the thing you're using anymore. That's usually database scaling, right? That's like usually running into a wall. And this is how it was at GitHub. We got successful. The database started to suck like it does everywhere. And we slowed down. And it's our goal that people will pick PlanetScale on day one of their business. It will make them quick. It will help them iterate. It will, be awesome for them. And then hopefully, if we do our job right, they will never run into those scaling problems that affect years 3 and 4 of the business. And hopefully that will give them a much more successful outcome for them as a company and mean that we're doing the right job for them. So I will show you what we've built. Actually, just raise hands. Have people tried the product at all, or did anyone see the announcement? Okay, great. So if you do have feedback, email me, sam@planetscale.com. We'll get back to you if you have questions or whatever you think you're becoming a user. Like, chat to us. We love chatting to our audience. So let's see. Can you see my screen? I can't really see all of you. So if you have questions, just unmute and interrupt me. It doesn't matter. This is PlanetScale. This is the database that hosts PlanetScale. So it's a little bit meta, and we're way over our plan, as you can see, in terms of rows read, rows written, and storage. Let's actually start there with how things are priced and how we meter things. So I personally believe that the cloud is all wrong. It's ugly and unconsumable and generally quite uninspiring. AWS, someone likened it to like the Costco experience. You go there, you buy things in big boxes, but it's quite unrefined, right? You're leaving with it in an old noodle, you're leaving with your groceries in an old noodle box or something, right? It's not really built for the end user. And it's built for sort of sysadmins and people messing around with Terraform and all of this stuff, when really everyone here, certainly me, just wants to get the idea into the world. We want to show people what we're building. I think the best cloud that's ever been built today is Heroku, because they understand what users are trying to do. They get the user value and they understand that people just want to build. And that user experience has kind of been lost. And when I started hearing the term serverless, like everybody, I kind of sneered a little bit because it's like, well, there's obviously servers. But what serverless tells us really is what people want to consume. They don't want to think about servers. They don't want to think about these things. And the more I thought about it, why should they? Like, surely racking servers and doing all of that stuff is the concerns of the cloud and shouldn't be passed on as an abstraction for users. And when I was thinking about coming to PlanetScale, and I've been in databases for years, I was GitHub's first database engineer. I started to sign up for our competitors' products and thinking, well, it's been a long time since I've gone to go and use a cloud database. I'm sure we're far along now. And I started signing up, and it was like, how many nodes and replicas and clusters and it was just like, oh, they've just taken the same old kind of ways of thinking about things from back in the data center days, and it's not really gone further than that. And so I thought, well, there's an opportunity here to build something serverless. And what we mean by serverless at PlanetScale is we handle the complexity, you handle serving your users and making your users happy. So when you use PlanetScale, we charge you on these 3 dimensions: the storage you consume. And first of all, it's just the storage you consume. When you upload your data to Dropbox, they don't charge you 3 times because they're replicating the data 3 times, right? You assume when you drop your data into Dropbox, you'll get to see it again one day. And that's because Dropbox runs a high availability storage backend, right? And so when we charge you for 60 gig of data, it's just 60 gig of data. Like, it's not 60 times 3, it's not 60 times however many regions, it's just that once, because we handle the replication and all of the other things that you expect to gain high availability and failover. We take care of that. The other 2 dimensions are the amount of rows you read and the amount of rows you write. And so we firmly believe you should just be paying for what you consume. You shouldn't pay for idle capacity and all of these things sitting around. We just want to make it painfully simple. So this is something that's very different about PlanetScale. We will never show you clusters. You don't see the word server or node or any of those things. We handle that. We're the experts. And the other important thing to remember is this is backed by Vitess. And as Jiten mentioned, Vitess ran at YouTube and runs at Slack. And if you go and look, Slack have blogged about 100% of their data being in Vitess. It's very powerful in the back end. But the point is, on day one, you shouldn't have to care about these things. We handle that scaling and that complexity for you. So we mentioned branching. Branching is the thing that well, it was unique to us until last week. Some people are starting to copy already, which is great. It's the sincerest form of flattery. We could have gone simple and said staging environments and whatever, but we believe that you should be able to get a branch that is an isolated copy of your database for you to interact with as simply as you get a pull request. How many people here have used Vercel? Anyone giving it a go? I love Vercel. We use it. It's great. And something that really stuck with me is preview branches, just giving the shareable URL to pass around to just like, I tried this thing, and it reduces the cost of sharing. It reduces the cost of collaboration to give people isolated environments. And I was speaking to folks, I was like, I've always obsessed over how far a developer inside a business can go without having to actually talk to people, because I think you can get some real creativity if you allow people to get going. And if you can just gain a branch that's an isolated database environment without having to open a ticket to your like ops team or whatever, you can start moving quickly. And so we came up with the concept of branching. Branches are like a separate environment, whether or not you boot one up to run CI against because you want like a bunch of infrastructure behind you, or whether it's just connected to a Vercel preview branch or whatever, branches are here for you. So like I said, we'll click on, this is, Francis has this branch. You can see the schema of our database that's in the branch. And she could just delete this branch when she's done. She might be testing. She might just be playing with a feature. It doesn't matter. In the same way you can spike a Git branch and get going, you can create a PlanetScale branch. We have the main branch, which is production. It's made super high available. It gets backed up every day by default. And this is where you would aim to send the majority of your site's traffic or whatnot onto your main branch. And then we have deploy requests. So how many people have worked in a team of people, a team with a database that's fairly busy and have had to manage a schema and get kind of schema changes into production? Okay, Osama, tell me about that experience of rolling it into production.
I think even before like doing the database schema changes, just getting that schema change merged, even if you're building a simple Rails app, was a nightmare. And then, depending on how big your database cluster is, getting that replicated, if you're managing your own cluster, was another nightmare at the database layer. And then if you further take that further ahead and think about the data warehouse, that's even a bigger nightmare.
Yes.
So
it's very messy. It's so funny, right? We all have our we have our pull requests and our GitHub Actions workflow, and everything's nice. And then it comes to the database change, and we're doing PT online schema change on the command line and just staring at it in a screen session, just thinking, why are we here? And it's 2021 and it hasn't got any better. And it's this, it's miserable. At GitHub, we got to the stage where we couldn't migrate the users table. It was a mess. So we had like a second users table that we used to join on. And every customer I talk to, our sales conversation goes very simply. I tell them the problems they have. You don't migrate tables anymore. You're joining on tables just to like get past this. Migrations are scary and break production. They all just sit there. Yep, that's us. That's where we are. We aim to solve that problem. So we built Ghost at GitHub to get around. Has anyone heard of Ghost? GHOST? Basically, we built it to get around not being able to migrate our extremely busy tables. It does it in a really database-friendly way without creating triggers. We implemented that technology, and the person who wrote it works at PlanetScale now. We implemented that technology into Vitess, meaning you can send fully online schema changes without taking down production, without creating load on the database. If you see a load spike, for example, the migration rate limits itself, and it does all those nice things. And we want pushing a schema change into production to feel the same as pushing code. And this is the beginning of the journey that we're going on. And the thing I will say about PlanetScale is I think we are the only company out there building a database that obsesses over the daily lives of our developers. Everyone else competes on the storage engine or some geo distribution thing they do or whatever. We care more about how people are productive with the database, and we make sure the scaling works, right? That's table stakes, and it's definitely table stakes for Vitess. And it's our job to make sure that works and you all are productive. So let's have a look at this deploy request. So Iani here has made some schema changes. So we can show you the diff of the schema change. We can show you when you're adding columns, removing columns, adding indexes, doing whatnot, and then you can push it into production. And this was a quick one, took 46 seconds to roll into prod. You can do it multiple times. And the ideal workflow would be you create your pull request, you use whatever you would use on the branch to make the schema changes. So you could use rake db migrate, you could use whatever, just straight up SQL from a GUI if you really want to. And then we look at the end state of that branch, and you can create a deploy request from there. It doesn't, we don't apply it in the order you applied it on the branch. We just allow you, because we want utmost compatibility, we just let you do it, and we work out the most efficient way of getting your schema to converge with production. If someone is already in the queue and you send a deploy request, we diff you against the end state of that person's running migration. So you're not going to get stuck in the queue, get to the head of queue, and then there'll be a conflict. We resolve that conflict at the time of you queuing, so that you know the queue will continue to get processed and go into production, and then we roll it online for you. And then you merge whatever branch you have of code that's dependent on this schema being reflected in production. I'll pause just for a second. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. We also have the table stakes that you would expect. We have backups. We have all the various different pieces that would allow you to kind of run this as a production database. But let me talk a little bit about the future of deploy requests. So how many people here have caused an outage by running a migration that drops a column that's being referenced? You really thought you'd cleaned up that code path, that that model was truly not being used anymore, and then what happens? I've taken GitHub offline twice doing that, because a lot of queries happen right at the same time, and you believe naively, the developers, that this is not being used anymore, and then before you know it, it goes down. What we're going to be able to do, because Vitess sees every single query, we're going to get into the stage where we can prevent deploy requests that would remove columns that are being referenced. We're going to be able to, block that for you, so that can't actually happen, because we see every query. And that's an actual thing that we're very excited about, is Vitess's ability to, because Vitess can pass every query and we pass it in Goland, there's so many various nice things we can do for users, like see that you're running in unindexed queries and doing all those things. And we aim to continue to deepen the feature set so that you feel like you've got constant kind of collaboration with the database, and then we make you better while you interact with the database. How many of you are Rails devs? Are you using Rails for your applications? We do things now, and we'll be doing this with more and more frameworks. If you're using Rails and you check the setting in the settings box, we're doing it so that you can, once you deploy, we will insert the schema migration number into production for you, so that it stays fully in sync, so that you can continually manage this with Rails apps. And there's just plenty of application specific tweaks that are coming that we think people will be very, very excited about. But it's the beginning of this journey, basically. Okay, that's about all I have to show you for now. Obviously, oh, by the way, everything you've seen here is doable by our CLI. You can branch, connect locally, do all of the various pieces. You can wire that up into your CI workflow if you want to use branches for CI. If you send a create database statement on a branch, we will create another branch for you underneath, so that you can parallelize your tests and do various pieces like that. It's very flexible and quite different in that way, I think. Does anyone
Thanks, Sam. I have a question about pricing.
Yes.
So first of all, it sounds actually really amazing that it can scale arbitrarily, especially if you have a spike, and then you don't end up paying for it constantly, because you just allocate it and you don't know where it's coming. So that sounds fantastic. But let's say you go from a really small scale company where you have a few thousand users and the cost of database hosting really don't matter, to something which is mid-scale. At that point, how does pricing for PlanetScale compare with something that is, that you yourself manage?
So when we set these pricing, there's two things. We had the pricing philosophy, which we wanted to keep as being understandable and not scary. And we want to make sure, so there's things we're going to do for that. We're going to allow people to set daily limits or budgets or whatnot, so it doesn't go out of control. One thing I thought about a lot is, you follow one Terraform example, and before you know it, you've got a $400 AWS bill, and you don't even know where it's gone, right? Like, we don't want that to happen to anyone. So first of all, it's all about making it non-scary when it comes to the billing. But there's multiple ways we can make this cost effective. So we actually, when we decided on the values we would set for rows written, rows read, and for storage, we asked a bunch of folks and customers that were moving away from RDS how much they were paying, how to look at their workload, and we also looked at our workloads and our bills for hosting and whatnot, and we based it on that. And we do not think we will come in at any more expensive than anyone would be paying at RDS. And actually, as you get into larger scale, it will start to probably become cheaper. So we have customers with multi-million-dollar a year RDS bills, and it's because they're paying extreme markups on just the top tier machines, basically, that Amazon has. Like, I think it's about a 300% markup when you've really got onto those. Now, the thing with Vitess is you can scale on commodity machines. If you scale out horizontally via sharding, you don't have to buy those ridiculously expensive machines on AWS. We handle that and keep you on mid-sized, well-packed machines in the back end. So actually, we feel that it's going to be quite cost effective. And it will be in line with pretty much the other solutions. Then when you factor in, if you're at that size of company, you have other concerns like velocity, like developer excitement, happiness, creativity internally, then it really becomes cost effective at that point, because those things that your other solutions, and it's hard to put a price on your team's productivity, basically.
Got it. Thank you. So the gist is that because you can scale horizontally on better utilized mid-scale machines, you end up becoming more cost. Got it.
Right. Like if you add a replica in AWS, you just get read scalability. Right. With us, right, with the pattern for that is sharding, so you'll get read and write scalability for the same amount of money. Does anyone else have other questions? Anything else you like?
I have a slightly different question around the developer experience. So when I was trying the beta, which you guys took down when you released, I noticed you were not giving a connection string, and you were rather giving, like environment variables. Like basically, I could construct the connection string on my own. But I was just curious, because you're trying to build a serverless experience, that makes it harder to, access from a serverless environment. I have to worry about the configuration suddenly. Is there a much more seamless experience you're thinking about where you just give me a string username password?
Yeah, we are a few weeks out from giving you that. Right now, we favored people going through our proxy just because we make sure it's secure. We are now working on making it very secure with mutual TLS over connection string. The reason is we decided to default. There's a lot of people that would connect literally over the internet and start sending things in plain text without realizing, and we wanted to make sure that wasn't possible. So we opted to ship early, get it out there with that style, and absolutely yes, within a couple of weeks you'll have connection strings and our node client for if you're connecting through lambdas or whatever. Speaking to serverless as well, and we haven't marketed this yet because we will do some sort of separate serverless campaign. Who's using Lambda and who has exhausted the connection limit of their current database? That is a very common thing we hear from people, is that the database they use currently doesn't, they do rollovers or scale ups on Lambda and start, PG bounce that falls over or whatever people have to use. Vitess is very connection efficient, and per Vitess process, we can handle about 60,000 connections. So with the infrastructure set how it is at PlanetScale, we could handle millions of client connections very, very quickly. And seamlessly. And so those kind of things get us really excited, because we're really set up for that serverless world, because Vitess at YouTube was running on, tens of thousands of machines and even more front ends that would, when an application deployment happened, would create a massive bursts of connections. And so it really speaks to that serverless use case.
Thank you. So what I'm hearing is you're solving for connection pooling and secure connections via connection string.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It'll be there very, very shortly. So Howard asks in chat, what does the UI look like for monitoring schema change and surfacing errors to operators? So it's not as rounded out as we'd like it to be. If a schema change fails where you spit back Y, basically, we need to just keep refining the UI to give you more and more of these like insights and knowledge as things go on, especially if things go wrong. But we usually will just, as soon as the migration starts to error, we will just spit back and tell you that the deploy actually failed. I don't have an example of a failed one, but yeah, we're going to get a lot better there and show you more of what's going on in production and give you more insights and information into how your queries are looking and what's running. But right now it's fairly simple.
Hey Sam, can I ask about pricing on the branches?
Yes, so we aim that our branches are not costing you anything additional. It's a part of the feature set. As branches start to get large and we allow people to snapshot data into branches, we will probably have to charge folks, but we will try and keep it significantly cheaper than the main production branches, just because it won't have all the guarantees and availability guarantees. We also imagine people will use branches for long-running features. Not everyone is as agile in terms of branch, merge, branch, merge, branch, merge. Some people, I imagine, will cut a release and a branch will become an almost staging environment that might live for months. We don't want to eat that cost completely, but we want to make sure that it's priced fairly in terms of that, And it's similarly how we do things like create shadow tables under the hood for the online migration process. We aim to try not to charge users for that as well, because we see it as part of the feature set. But that could evolve over time. It just depends how things net out and how usage is. And that's partly why we're coming out in beta, right? So that we can learn these things from users and kind of reserve the right to make a few changes as things go on. Anyone else have anything you'd like to ask? I could ask you some questions. I'd love to learn a bit from all of you. What databases are you using at the moment? What's the go-to? Are you going to tell me Postgres, I think? Tell me why. Ola, why Postgres?
It just seemed like the default to be used based on Googling and what people were using. I know it seems like the feature set between Postgres and MySQL are close, and it just seemed like what the cool kids were using, even though it's 20, 30 years old.
So Vitess is complete MySQL compatible, except for some minor pieces. And I would love to hear what would it take for the real hardcore Postgres fans here. By the way, data residency, we will in the next few weeks will also be allowing you to specify where your data, which region of the world your database is deployed in, and do it per branch. So if you have a dev team somewhere else in the world, you'll be able to provision the branches close to the user so that you can actually use it. And we have people internally who use it instead of having a local database. They just create a branch for the feature they're working on, and they're really enjoying that flow, because we've all done, like, no one likes switching branches, like tearing down the DB, starting up again. Like, this just allows you to have like multiple places you switch through. But I would love to get like some rude questions from the Postgres crew who want to pick apart MySQL or Vitess. I just want to hear about like what stops you thinking about a solution like this and sticking with Postgres.
I was scarred from using it at a previous job, but it wasn't really, well, it was an old version of MySQL. So I don't really know if that's fair, but it was like slow. It didn't even have like, you couldn't even do like with statements. It was very painful. So it's maybe I just need to try a newer version.
It's gotten a lot better. So my evaluation of MySQL is it's the choice of everyone at major scale. It's much easier to operate than Postgres, but the developer interface and they're using it as a developer is way worse than Postgres. And we really want to close that gap and make the MySQL part of it kind of an implementation detail and bring new features to the database that people have never seen, and hopefully make I think it saddened me in 2021 we're comparing two storage engines that do basically the same thing, and so I'm hoping we can advance the database conversation forward. that it's no longer Postgres via MySQL, and it's just why aren't you using PlanetScale is the real question. Does anyone have any magic kind of feature, anything they would, if I gave you a magic wand to manipulate our roadmap, is there anything you would love us to add? And just dream big, anything, just, I want unreasonable expectations from the database, the stuff that you would love to see.
Yeah, customer vaults, and I know there's a startup also or a bunch in this space, but being able to, I would say, encrypt. What makes me most uncomfortable about startups like Notion is that their developers can read my data just because they have the connection string. Like, as a customer, they can read my notes, and that just makes me super uncomfortable. Encryption at rest is like a 1990s thing. I want encryption everywhere and devs not being able to read it. Right.
So you want to be able to hand a key.
Exactly. I want my data locked, basically, as a consumer, to trust applications built on top of PlanetScale. So
how would you feel? How do you see the kind of journey there to us being able to do things on your behalf? Would you, so a migration, for example, what do you think the user story would look like there?
So basically, if you think of it, if I'm the developer developing against PlanetScale, I would basically rely on PlanetScale to ensure that the data that my application is storing is, of course, compliant with whatever the schema is and stuff. And my only ask there is that if a developer can connect to a database, they should not be able to pull each and every column out of it. So maybe what I'm asking for is in the schema, you overload the schema with an additional label with I don't know, against each column, which says that this needs to be not readable by developer or something, just vault, and that data always gets preserved at the database layer, so the application can read it, and maybe you have to play with the connection strings or something to distinguish. But do you understand the problem statement?
Yeah, no, I see it. It's actually, I believe Apple use client-side keys that get handed through when you do a request to iCloud to actually.
Yeah, they stored it all in AWS, and the devs can't see, but it's all in AWS, right? And
right.
Yeah.
And a system like that actually is built on top of Vitess in YouTube and Google, because those were, logging and authenticate. I mean, we did not want our user data to be accessible to Google engineers, and you had to really break glass to be able to do that. And it was very heavily logged when that was done, and there were consequences to not doing it properly, so on and so forth. But yes, there is I know exactly the kind of system that you're looking for, and that was built actually on top of Vitess, because again, before we actually go to the database, we know which tables in which database this query would be touching. And so before going to the database layer, we can pass it through any enforcement layers that we need to look at and verify with, and then send the query. So not only do we just log, but we also enforce similar things. And yeah, that kind of a system will not be too hard to implement on top of the capabilities that Vitess today has. But we just need to figure out when, how, etc.
If you email me, I would love to set up time and bring an engineer, and we could have that discussion, because that sounds like a really interesting use case. And these are the types of things, again, we want to solve developer pain, help you build for your users, and that sounds security is something that's always compelling. Automatic change tracking across all tables. Tell me a little bit more about what you're looking for there.
Yeah, hey. So a lot of the time, especially for like business use cases, we have to keep an audit log of what changed. And right now that often requires a lot of manual setup. Postgres actually just added this listen notify feature pretty recently, where you can have a listener that's called by a trigger, and then that thing can queue some job that writes into your data warehouse that, row X changed this field from A to B, and do that for deletes and creates. And you have to set that up for every table. So if you have a very big relational graph, it's a lot of work to set up. So it's hard to imagine how this would scale, since you would create a lot of data, but you ask for crazy requests. So it'd be sweet if
Actually,
this worked.
There's a lot of magic inside Vitess in terms of how Vitess does replication. And so again, it's something that doesn't sound out of reach in terms of there's probably this use case built somewhere into Vitess, but that is also very interesting. And same with the sort of change data capture in general is something that Vitess is pretty well built for when it comes to V-replication. Has the ability to keep other data stores in sync. This is just all feature sets that haven't been exposed yet through the product, and that's why we're very excited to build on top of Vitess, because there's a bunch of these things as part of the solution that is going to just involve kind of bringing those into the lives of developers. Things like materialization as well is something that Vitess does really well. You can give Vitess a select query and it will materialize the results in another table. No matter how broadly sharded your environment, it can fan it back in. So if you want to report on specific types of data and have that live and just do point selects, Vitess can do that kind of thing too. Is there anything else anyone would like to know? Any other crazy features that would be useful to all of you?
This is a general request I've had of most databases, again, coming from analytics, and I'm sorry I'm asking for all these features.
No,
Looking for, so basically, like data dictionaries is a thing that you worry about when you're in the analytics side of things, right? But if production databases could let you overload your schemas with labels, so instead of trying to find what does master underscore customer underscore workspace underscore dash stand for as a table, there's literally a human readable label. And so down the road, when I consume that data in a warehouse or any other analytics system, I'm able to see what those tables map to versus trying to understand looking at data.
So sort of annotations for the schema.
Yes.
We had that. I had that fun 2 weeks ago when we were pulling stuff into Bigtable, and not all of it are mapped, especially when it's coming from some sort of events system. Okay, that sounds interesting. I'd love to learn more about that use case as well. So we're getting close to time. I would love to invite you to give PlanetScale a go. We're very communicative with our users. We love to learn from folks and we love to help people out. We're at that wonderful stage of being a company where it's just about helping customers win and get up to speed quickly and enjoy the experience. So if you are interested in giving PlanetScale a real go and want some just help and some knowledge share, we'd be more than happy to chat with you and learn about your use case and seeing how we can help. So please just reach out whenever. And I'm sure, hopefully we'll get a chance to come back and show you more as we deliver against our roadmap and build more developer-focused features.
Can I throw in a last minute question? I would love to get analytic workloads like store procedures and even maybe geospatial analysis if we're going really crazy, so that we didn't always have to just like ship all like application data straight over to like Snowflake and BigQuery and anyone else.
Yeah, that may be a way away, but I'm certain it's going to have to be something that comes eventually. Like a bunch of folks have already asked us about that kind of data warehouse style usage, seeing as the data is in one place. It sounds exciting. I think it'd be unwise to split focus, but at the moment, but I'm sure it's something we can get to in the future. Great. Well, thank you all for having us. I hope I get to chat with more of you soon and maybe visit you all in person now that